So, once again, I made a mistake. I'm very sorry for that. I forgot to turn on the volume. So, I did a very nice introduction. So, I will start again. And sorry for the minute of silence. That was quite fun. Let's go. Yeah, thank you. So, I will start again. So, hi everyone, and welcome back to another Emma on the IGDA LocSIG. So, I was saying, I'm Aurélie, your host for today, with our guest Guido Di Carlo, who will answer all your questions. We will chat about working and communicating with localization service providers, and from different angles, from the developer's point of view and from the translator's point of view as well. But you can also ask Guido all the questions you want. We will just pick them up at the end to avoid getting lost. So, and now we start again. Guido, can you present yourself, please?
Thank you, Ore. Well, my name is Guido. I have 6 years of experience as a project manager, working for different translation agencies. And I have an additional 6 years of experience as a game translator or localization specialist. So, I've been in this industry for 12 years now. I can't believe it.
Such a long time. You're like among the survivors.
Yeah. I'm getting old.
No, we don't get old. We just level up. That's it.
we get experience.
Yeah, we get a lot of experience, So, okay, so we were here to talk about localization service providers and how to communicate and work with them. And I wanted to do a quick definition because I kind of put everyone under the localization service providers label, because I meant by that, obviously, agencies. But I also wanted to include translators for the first part, because translators are also localization service providers. So there is a part that is right for them at the beginning, and then you will see the difference. And with that, let's follow up the workflow, the usual flow of localization process from the developers first. So usually it starts when they are ready for localization. And based on your experience on that side, what would you say that, according to you, first maybe they need to know before they begin?
Well, I think that this is mostly a question that is related to both, budgeting and also like project management from the developer's point of view. And this depends on whether the devs have like previous experience with localization, or whether they have a publisher that is taking care of it, or whether they have enough budget, like calculated for localization. So obviously this depends heavily on each project's specific details. But basically, I will say that it's important to think about localization as early as possible in the overall project, right?
Yeah.
But we find that most times it is rushed at the end of the process instead. So I think that's why, like several, not only agencies or translators, but I think the industry as a whole is trying to put some emphasis on the importance of thinking about localization very early on the development process. And that's because, when you're handled a video game that it's finished and there can't be any further changes because they have a schedule, and it gets very complicated to work around issues that probably will appear.
Yeah.
So
lots of issues.
Yeah, there will be issues. If somebody says that there won't be any issues at localization, or that promises that they can handle anything without issues, that's probably a lie.
Yeah, because obviously, like, the point of languages and culture is that they are all different. So obviously you will face situations where something works for you and it doesn't work in other language. We talked about it before, but like genders, plurals, and everything else, grammar in general doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong in localization.
And if you think it will go unnoticed, it will not.
It will not. So that's why it's very important to at least reach out to people that, you know, if you don't have any idea how localization works, or if it's your first time, you know, tackling a localization project, then it's very important to reach out to people and, you know, ask for assistance, or, you know, ask questions around how this works, how that works. And actually the IGDA localization document, which is being updated, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great start for any developer. So I hope that gets out soon.
We'll try.
No pressure.
Yeah, it's a massive work because in like 10 years, the localization industry has evolved a lot. And we have new stuff to take into consideration, like genders with like inclusivity and everything. So yeah, it's a huge work, but the PDF that is online, I think would be a good start for now. Yeah. So you can find it on the LocSIG webpage. You can find the document in under resources, I guess, and you can download it. It's the latest available version. And when the new version will be live in a few years, maybe, we will let you know.
I think it's a wonderful document for all parts involved in localization, not only developers. Me as a translator, I read it entirely, and I always recommend it to the developers I talked with, because it's a great starting point to, you know, find out how to work around certain issues and to think ahead of time.
Yeah, that's the key element here, thinking ahead of time, because if you don't anticipate, you go straight into the problems and everything. So yeah, anticipate everything, like be ready at the beginning with the, I would say, the most annoying part, which is internationalization in French. It's the same in English, but with an accent. And this one is very important. Like, it's the core element. It's everything that will display properly in every language. And from there, thank you, Caro. From there, you can move on to more artistic stuff, I could say, with like dialogues and everything.
Yeah, or even, you know, dealing with cultural issues, you know, that may happen on a local level on certain regions or certain countries that you are not aware of. And obviously, it's great if a developer tries and goes ahead to tackle all of these issues on their end. But obviously, reaching out and, you know, and getting feedback from the people that working on those cultures, it's equally important as well down the road.
We know it's tricky because at this moment of the project, localization is like far away. It's the end of the line almost. So I understand it's very hard to think about it right now when you're just starting to work on the project and putting things together on paper. But yeah, when it comes to culture, it's very, very important to ask around, ask people from the culture to check a few points, images, sentences, audio. You can have a lot of examples, like Caro is giving you a few in the chat. You have lots of examples that you need to take into consideration, because in some countries it could work, but in others it maybe it won't. So ask for pro advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Wolf, where were we?
I was going to ask, so first step, asking for pro. So you can contact either translators if you know them. You can find some of them, because we are not on the internet, all on the social networks, but we are there. You can also ask agencies, which are the two main profile. Maybe your publisher, because if you work with the publisher, I think they have good advice to provide you about some specific topics. and they're a good source of information as well. And when we come to translators and agencies, who should we look for when we are a developer looking for localization to localize a game? Should we look for any agency, any translator, or should we look for something more specific profile?
Again, it's a question that it's heavily related to budget, but not necessarily a high budget is going to be equal to a high quality output. As with anything, the more you cut the middleman, you get maybe a more fair price, right? But that's not to say that agencies don't do a great job at what they do, because they can, for example, if you have a very complex project or a very big game being translated into a lot of languages, then you will need someone to take care of communicating with the different translators, and carrying these messages back between the developers and the translators. Obviously, if you have some kind of complexity at the files level, I mean, the files where you extract the text to translation, maybe you need some file engineering. So I would say that agencies are able to tackle more complex and bigger projects. And obviously this comes at a cost, because obviously the agency has to pay their employees and have some profit margins from the whole process, obviously. And then we have this sort of hybrid between agencies and freelance translators, which are like translators that work as a group, or single translators that work with their own team and do, they play a role of project manager and translator at the same level. And probably you will find better prices working with these people, not necessarily, but most of the time. But you will, it's more like buying bread at the supermarket or going to your bakery, around the corner, where they know your name and the kind of bread you like, and it will be a more tailored service. It will be a little bit more closer to the heart, and obviously, if you as a developer or as a publisher, have some time to manage the project yourself. I mean, communicating, sending files, replying to answers, paying invoices, and etc. You can also go ahead and work directly with freelancers. Most freelancers know other people from other languages, so if you are looking for more people, you can ask them, support your local translator.
Exactly, the power of network. But like you said,
it's a matter of budgeting and complexity.
Yeah, obviously, like if you need audio and dubbing and everything, it will obviously cost you more, and you need the services of a studio, which is, I know some translators do have contact with studios that can do that, with people that can handle all the voice actors and everything. But usually agencies, some of them do have branches that are actually audio studios, so they can help you with that. So obviously it's different. And if you're working on a smaller game, you don't need audio, at least you don't localize audio, maybe you can switch to something more hybrid, like you said, a team of translators with a good network and someone to answer questions. That's one of the key points, because it takes time. Don't underestimate translators. We'll talk about this later, about why we ask so many questions. But like communicating for localization takes time. And something that's also underestimated, it's what do you need to provide? Like now you've picked up your agency. One stuff we didn't cover, do you go for any agency, for example, or do you pick an agency that is specialized in game localization?
Yeah,
Your advice.
I was about to say that. Obviously, nowadays there are a lot of agencies specializing in video game localization. So, uh, picking a translation agency that doesn't have any experience or has little, it doesn't make sense. There are a lot of options to choose from today, on most continents. So wherever you are based, you're going to probably find someone near you. So I will totally advise for going, with agencies or people specialized on video game localization. But even in this huge group, which we call localization service providers, you will find anything, from small boutique studios to huge behemoths that are, among the biggest players in the whole translation industry, not just video games. You also have to try and pick some questions to ask to agencies, to see who you feel comfortable working with.
Yeah.
Coming from within the translation industry, I will say my advice is to bear in mind that anything that the sales team promise, it's going to be half of that approximately. There's always this huge dispute, filled between sales and project management teams, because sales always promises everything, and then the project managers have to make that real, and obviously it's not possible with the time and the budget they are given. Yeah. So when you speak to somebody, like anything, like you go buy a car or a house or whatever, you have to read between the lines and see if it sounds too good to be real, then you have to scratch a little bit to see what comes off of it. So that will be an advice when it's the time to pick one and purchase some service. It's a good idea to know who you are talking with.
Yeah. So ask around and dig a bit about localization, what you need to do, what it costs and everything. Discuss with other people who went there too, to have some advice that will, I think, probably be helpful to pick someone. Whether you need an agency or you prefer to go with freelancers, up to you. And depends on your project, obviously.
Yeah, and also it's important to talk, even if you're going like self-publishing, or if you don't have a publisher yet, but if you're in talks with a publisher, or if you're planning to go with a certain publisher, it's also a good question to ask, if this publisher is if they are funding localization efforts, if they have people working with them, they trust or whatever, or even if you're not working with them, and you can just ask any publisher you have, and they are probably working with people that know their trade. So it's also a good idea to reach out to publishers and talk about localization with them, because they probably have more experience than developers.
Yeah, and they can answer, I think, a lot of questions beforehand.
Yeah,
they have their favorite partners too. So technically, if they work together, that should be great. Technically.
Yeah, and another thing that comes to my mind now is that publishers tend to have very important information about what kind of genres work in certain markets, or on certain platforms. So they can also guide you and say, okay, you have, look, for example, a soccer game, and people go crazy for football in Latin America and Brazil, for example. So it will make sense to translate into Latin American Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese. That kind of knowledge, it's also very specific to publishers.
Yeah.
So they can also give you great advice on what languages and what markets could work for your game.
That's a good point. We didn't talk about this exactly. Like, it's great to localize, but in which language do you localize? What's your target? Because obviously, the more languages you have, the higher goes your budget as well. So that's what you said is very interesting, and yeah, that's interesting to also to ask the question to the publishers is like, what languages are really interesting for our game to localize first, and then if your game work, why not add more languages as you go?
Yeah, this is also very important, and we've seen a lot of this with, for example, publishers or developers recurring to community translation, right, which is practically free translation, free labor. And this is, at least my position in this is, don't feel pressure to localize.
Yeah.
Try and see how your game goes. I mean, if you release your game in English, you will have a very good audience, right, to test waters. So if you have like good results in English, then you can start thinking about localization with the first drive that you get with those sales. So it's obviously it's very nice to play a game in your language, but I think we as translators prefer to do a very well paid, and gamers like to see a quality job, a quality translation, right? So instead of recurring to plan B, stick to plan A, and when the time is right, it will come. So there's no need to rush it.
Yeah. And at that point, even if you don't localize the game, it's important that you prepare the files properly as if you were going to localize it. Because otherwise, the game is like finished. And if you go to localization like this, you will need to rework the code at some point. Like we said, the plurals, the genders, just this. We'll need to sometimes rethink the code to make it work in other languages. So it's important that even if you don't localize, your game is like polished in English.
Yeah.
And so when the publisher comes and say, okay, we want to put the game on this and this platform in those languages, otherwise it can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as having good code, right? If your code is a mess, it's not documented, and if you have to go back to that eventually, or if somebody else has to go, and work with that code, it's going to be pretty hard. You will lose a lot of time and potentially money. So the same is true for localization as well. The sooner and the better you prepare things, then the smoother will go all the process down the road. So even if you're not going to localize your games right after release, or it's going to be down in the future, as you said, preparing everything and having everything organized just in case, it's a great idea.
Yeah. What do you think, from a comment from the chat, the order about localization? So if I read well, it's game in Chinese or Russian, translated into Russian or Chinese, and to fix. I would say there is English somewhere. In this.
Yeah, I mean, there is a number. It's a question of numbers, right? Obviously, after English, the most spoken language in the world is Chinese.
Yeah.
However, navigating the Chinese market is really hard, and you usually need, someone at the other end in China to help you navigate that market, because it's not that easy as releasing a Chinese translation and and expect to do well in China. So while it's a great idea to have that huge market, it's not only, it's not enough with localizing your game. You have to put some kind of work behind that. And yeah, I agree that Russian and French, Italian, German, and Spanish are obviously the best languages to localize early on, at least. But this is if we.
It depends on the game as well.
Yeah, I was to say that this is true for console and PC games. But for example, for mobile is huge in emerging markets as Latin America, as Southeast Asia. So you have Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, although it's not Southeast Asia. These emerging markets that have less purchase power than, say, Europe or the United States, but that they have a huge population and mostly focused around mobile gaming. And it's a huge market. It's very important, and it's not to be oversighted. It's as a Latin American myself, and as a translator that works and has worked on a lot of mobile games. It's a very, very important market.
Yeah.
So again, it depends a lot on your project, and so that's what it's good to ask questions, because we tend to think of video games, on this like traditional sense of a white guy playing on a console on his room, and that is changing a lot. If you're traveling on the metro, you can see old ladies playing on their cell phone, people that we don't think about when we say the word gamer or player, right?
Yeah.
But it's really important to research on this and to understand your markets.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot. There are a lot of parameters actually to take into account when you want to localize a game. Like we said, the language is your audience, the support on which the game will be played as well. So that's quite a lot actually to take into account just before you do anything. Just like asking questions, what should I do? And yeah, you already have a lot of stuff to check. And the localization hasn't started yet. Did we cover everything from that point? So the audience, the languages and everything, the market, which partner to choose? Before starting anything, I think we covered many questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost impossible to cover everything.
Yes.
But I think the key takeaway here is ask questions.
Yeah.
When you want to, because this is not something you can Google easily, right? It's like not very public knowledge. I mean, there
find different information like about the languages you should pick. But obviously, you need to, like you said, you need to ask someone to have a real insider's opinion about this.
Right. It's like you can have like you can form a general idea by Googling, okay, what are the most important languages, markets, etc. But until someone from the industry takes a look at your project and see the specific details, you're not really going to have, I think, like the whole picture, right? So yeah, I think it's very important to do homework, on your own, but also to reach out and ask all necessary questions.
Okay, so don't see any other questions. Feel free to ask questions if you want, if something is unclear or if you have some experience to share. So next question I wanted to ask is like, okay, now you've picked up your partner, you know which languages and everything. So it's time for the files. Time to send your files. What do you send to your partner for localization?
Well, I think the first rule we're all going to agree is don't send files that have all strings sorted alphabetically. Okay,
Yes.
That doesn't help anybody. But in all seriousness, I think this is also a great question to ask before actually trying to send any files, because we call this in the industry lock kit or localization lock kits. Basically, a lock kit is not only the text that you see in screen, but ideally it will also include contextual information, speaker information, who is talking, and ideally who is this character talking to, because for several languages it's not the same if you are talking to 1, 2, or more people. We also love knowing the gender and the age of a given character. Even if you haven't thought about a gender, it's great to know that this character doesn't have, a given gender, or it's gender neutral or whatever, non-binary. This is all great information because of how languages work and how gender works at a grammar level for each language. So the sooner we have all this information, and the more accurate and comprehensive all this information is, the better job we can do. You will, this is always a great example, is that on what we call query sheets, where basically files where we post questions and the devs provide us with answers, you will always see Japanese and Chinese translators asking if a brother or a sister is younger or older, because they don't have a word for brother or sister. They have older brother or younger brother, or older sister and younger sister. So it's a very funny, for me at least, a very funny phenomena that always happens in most games. And even, thinking ahead of time in saying this is the younger brother of this character will save you having to reply to a question down the road.
Yeah.
Now imagine how many cultural stuff like that can happen on a complex storyline or whatever. So yeah, I think having as much information as you can on a lock kit, even if it seems at the moment, if it seems useless or pointless, it would help. It will help us grasp the general idea of how your game works and how characters develop their stories, or whatever.
Yeah. Characters.
And
I'm thinking images as well, because how many times did you localize weapons without any image?
Yeah, images speak way louder than words. It happens a lot. Now that you mentioned weapons, it happens a lot with items, weapons, armor. That I get something in English, that doesn't tell me anything. Like a very abstract word for a weapon, and I'm like, do you have an image for this? And they provide me with an image, and I will come up with the perfect translation just by seeing it, and conceptualizing what the name plus the image, ticks on your head. Yeah. And video, it's even better than images. If you can record some alpha or some very early build of your game, that also works wonders for us, because getting a feeling of how a video game plays, it's very important for words, for how we put words out.
Yeah, and it may sound silly, but it helps for everything that has to do with the menu or the interface, because I think they are the hardest sometimes to localize. One word can mean so many different things that are still logical in the game.
Yeah, I think the contextual information is even more important on, obviously, user interface and standalone words, or because we can work with story dialogues without a lot of extra context, because we build context from the whole segments that we're translating. But if you're translating, for example, buttons or menus, we will ask a lot of questions if we don't have context on what standalone word on a huge Excel is. So yeah, and try not to get angry when we ask questions.
Yeah, they may sound silly, but one thing that people don't know, like translators, they work on the text, while when you are playing the game, all this context information are somehow displayed on the screen with the images, with where they are situated on the screen. One word like open can be a verb, can be anything you want, actually. It can be a box or a chest that is open, and in French, because we are one of those annoying gendered language, it can be masculine or feminine, for example. Or it can be plural. Yeah, is it a verb or a noun? Exactly. How many times do we ask this question? Is it a verb or a noun? It sounds silly, but sometimes we don't have the image.
We translators kind of develop a sixth sense to know if something is infinitive or imperative, or if it's a verb or a noun. But ideally, we shouldn't. We should only use our sixth sense on very, very, very urgent cases. Ideally, we wouldn't need it.
We shouldn't have to guess stuff. Stuff like this should be obvious for us. But that's the most important part. Like, we just take the text apart. That's why we ask so many questions, because we see the game from the point of view of the text. So it's like looking at it backwards and seeing all the little flaws, if I can say, even typos or inconsistencies. That's something that happens a lot too. The text being a bit inconsistent sometimes with names, for example.
Yeah. And something worth of mention is that, as a developer, maybe you don't have to go and try to give your agency or your translators a human readable file. Sometimes I've seen developers trying, obviously in perfectly good faith, to give translators like by human readable files, I mean, an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or whatever, something that you can, open on any computer. Maybe if you are working with PO files, XML files, or whatever other format you are getting from your own tools, maybe we can work with those, and then you won't have to do like importing files again into your own tools, or you won't have like issues with code or tagging or whatever. So even before going through all the hassle of exporting text to a human readable file, maybe talk with your LSP, your provider, and ask them, hey, can you work with this format? And most probably we can.
Yeah, the most common one, I think, like you said, XML, JSON, the PO files. So sometimes you have something close to HTML, something that works too. So CSV can work as well. We like those because you can provide a lot of information that our tools can just dispatch in the right places. So we have like something that's really important is commenting your text, especially dialogues, and don't put them alphabetically.
I think actually now Unity is doing a great job, like updating their translation plugin. I think that's the culprit for all the alphabetically sorted IDs. I think that was something from the translation plugin from Unity, and I think that was fixed a couple of versions ago. Again, I saw it on a forum. So again, before doing things yourself and maybe complicating things both for your provider and for you, go ahead and ask questions. As much as we like asking questions, we also like providing answers. So we will be very glad to answer these kind of questions. And even if we don't know, we'll go ahead and research a little bit for you.
Exactly. So we've covered the files. Something that comes up and that needs to be discussed with the provider is the deadline. What is a reasonable time frame for the localization?
I don't think we can have like a very general, or an answer that works for all cases, because it will depend on the complexity of your text, on the availability of the translators, and although agencies have like pools of translators they can work with, we're very busy most of the time. And even more if you want experienced people, right? I think, while, for example, I can translate up to 4,000 words per day, I can't do that, for entire weeks or entire months. I have to rest. I also have other projects. So again, it's good to ask these questions before you have other commitments. So if you are thinking you want to release your game on this certain date, then you have to make sure that translators have enough time to do their work, and so you don't you're not rushing people. And this is also very important that we have heard a lot of things about crunch culture on the video game company, but little is said about crunch in localization as well. So if you really want to make a difference and you want to have a crunch-free game, then you also have to think about your providers, not only translation, obviously, but art, video, sound, wherever, and you have to have enough time for people not to crunch to get your game to the market by the desired date.
Yeah. So
I think that's the most important thing I can say, at least, is that asking questions and getting estimates and deadlines before you put your own deadline. It's very important to avoid crunch.
Yeah, we can say like you say, you can do up to 4,000 per day, but that's high pace. I mean, it's like, I think the usual for a translator, average is like 2,000 or something. That's already a good pace, because that means translated, proofread by the translators, and good to go for proofreading, for example. So it's already high pace. And obviously, when you have a game that have like thousands and thousands of words, it will take time. And you cannot expect games that have as many words as a book to be translated properly and with quality in a few days. We see that sometimes, often, like you said, crunch for translators and QA after that. Those very super short deadline with huge volumes of text. And that's something that, like you said, ask questions to anticipate, but maybe a bit later in the game development, because obviously you need the text for at least the main text, I would say, even if it's not polished, to get an idea.
Again, ask questions, and obviously as soon as possible.
Yeah, be a translator, ask questions. Okay, so and you participated in an article published earlier this week and written by Jennifer O'Donnell about localizing your game. So same, you can find it on the LocSIG webpage to have general idea about how it goes for scheduling localization, and having some examples of what to do and what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we are done. We've covered languages, time frame, everything. The files, mostly. So next step with the providers will be probably the translation itself.
What can I say?
Answer
The text
question.
goes, source text goes in, translated text goes out. No, it's not that simple. And I think actually most of the work, even on the developer side on localization, will also occur while translating the game, because you will have to answer a lot of questions, and also you will find issues that arise. What we have been talking about: cultural issues, grammar issues, and it's very important, to try to prevent as many issues as possible. Something that it's always an advice is that not hard coding any anything that's going to be translated in your game. So all text has to be accessible for translators, and if you include, for example, variables or tags or concatenated strings, it's very important to give information to your translators of how that works. Although we are people of words, we also like working with a little bit of logics and mathematics, and we also do this kind of work because it's very important to have all this information and context when we translate. Again, if you're working from English, you have to know that English is a fairly simple. I don't mean easy. I mean simple in its structure compared to other languages. So what works in English may not and will not work with most languages out there. So again, it's very important to try to not have like a one for all solution. It's better to be flexible and understand how each language has its own specifics. And that's why I say that most of the work will occur what we are translating, because you will learn a lot about other languages.
Yeah, and you will see the flaws in your code and stuff you didn't anticipate. It will happen at any point because you cannot anticipate everything. Even if you're super prepared, there is always something that will not work, or that will be overlooked, or that you think it will work and it doesn't. There's always something.
Yeah, to put one example, I don't know if I got this right, but I think that the Polish language has like two plurals. You have like a singular for one, and then you have a plural for 2, 3, and 4. And I think that 5 is another plural, and then it goes back. Well, so for example, Spanish and English are both similar in that we have only one singular and one plural form. But for example, you have Polish, and if you were thinking that your beautiful solution of putting, a singular and a plural string is enough, you will need another one for Polish and Russian and probably other Slavic languages. So, that's the kind of thing that by yourself you're never going to fix, with only your language. But getting all this information from the people working on it,
yeah,
it's perfect.
That's why you need to prepare enough, to have enough time during the localization in order to face these kind of problems, because it means you will have to rework on the code. Something a bit stupid, but if you have, like we said, genders, and characters can talk to other characters with different genders because it can be anyone they're talking to, you will need to have sentences in masculine, feminine, and maybe neutral gender as well, just in case. So that means you have to triple everything. Something I see very often as well, because we talk about the platform where the game will be published, and something I see very often is the terminology for the different consoles, that often we have to ping back the dev saying, okay, this will not work because, like, I know that for French, the three of them do not use the same term for joystick. It's not exactly the same. So you cannot reuse one or the other.
Yeah, it's the same for Spanish. We're talking about official terminology for the three main consoles, which are Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. So, while they may have the same term in English, you may need to split that same string in three, because for other languages, that same term are three different terms. And this even happens with I think this is the most bizarre thing, is that Nintendo for Latin American Spanish asks for a very precise verb for press.
Okay.
One that we never use. So it's very, very specific, and this is when you need, it happens very recently with a project we were working on, that the developers were totally unaware of any any of this, and they even had the wrong terminology in English. So their game wouldn't even pass certification for consoles in English. So this is something I also wanted to bring to the table, is that probably the text on your game is not perfect yet. It's not polished as much as you thought, or maybe even some plot stuff. And translators are great at polishing your own English, or your own source language, and we will find a lot of typos, punctuation issues, maybe some plot holes. But this wasn't this character dead? How is he now alive? Oh no, I forgot to write the part where he comes back again. So yeah, we are pretty good at spotting that kind of stuff, and it's like an extra service that will come for free.
Exactly. But yeah, just like Juan said, many people are not aware about this certification issue, and that's a bit silly, like to not pass this certification just for a little thing like terminology, because it's very, very important. Even in, like you said, in your source language, you have to be careful to use the proper terminology or it won't work. So it's the same for every languages.
Yeah, and I know from several developers like Rami Ismail, that not passing a certification test is like weeks, a delay of weeks or months on your end. So if you're looking for a certain deadline and you don't have all certification related stuff right, then you maybe have to wait for an extra month until you get the possibility to certificate your game again. So
yeah, that's something to be very careful, especially for consoles. I don't think for mobile you have something like this, but still you should be aware of differences. At least in French, there are different terms between iOS and Android. Like for settings, it's two different terms. So most of the time you have to take that into account as well, because if you want to explain to your players where to go, you have to use the proper terminology, or they will struggle to find the solution to debug the problem. So
yeah, absolutely. But this doesn't, I mean, at least it won't block at the certification level. There was a very recent meme that was like, console certification, it works like you put one word wrong, you're out. And PC certification is thank you for not putting ransomware or malware on your game. Basically, PC and mobile are very, very open platforms. It's if I will have to say, it's easier and probably makes a lot more of sense if you want to get your game out to go to PC and mobile and then work on porting to consoles.
The main issue I would point out for PC is something that should be standard now is rebinding the keys. Because
French people,
yeah, Lucille shared a tweet about this. We use an AZERTY keyboard, but note that in Quebec, I think I'm not wrong about this, they use the QWERTY one. So if you do the French for France, it's AZERTY, but don't lock it on AZERTY because your Canadian players won't be very happy about this. And it's not comfortable for everyone because, I mean, the keys are not really at the proper place. You can look up an AZERTY keyboard. It's kind of messed up. You have to, you have to train yourself to get the place.
I remember my first experience with an AZERTY keyboard, and it was quite funny. I couldn't write an email at all.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. It's just a few letters, but it gets confusing, especially if you need the one with the numbers. Those are fun. So that's a thing I would say, like, binding the keys, it's okay, but don't lock them for a region because it may not work for people.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the translation part. So we said, like we repeated, allow enough time for any issue that can come up, like the certification, where you need maybe to triple the strings in order to get all the terminology correct if you go for all 3 consoles at once. Allow enough time to maybe correct the source text, because if translators spot, like you said, plot holes on everything, that means the text will go back and then back again to translation. So it's important as well to stay on top of the questions and try to answer as fast as possible, or to send the proper information to whoever is concerned in the developers team to correct anything, because it can be maybe an image that has a wrong text in it, or it can be something that, like, you need to tweak the code for to make it work. Like you said, concatenated strings are a nightmare. In French, the structure is kind of similar to English, but I know languages like, I think it's German, where you have a particle of the verb that goes at the end of the sentence. I think Japanese sentences also, the verb is at the end. So obviously, if you put 2 strings together to form a full sentence, there are languages it will not work. So that's a thing to be aware. And it will maybe not work in any context because genders, plurals, those Latin languages that are annoying, that cannot do everything neutral like everyone else. Okay. Okay. So I think we've covered, maybe we can, I don't know if we want to switch a bit to freelancers before to the, like, if we keep the usual localization flow, because I think it's the part that concerns them most before the end of the project.
Yeah, I think we can mention also localization QA.
Yeah.
Which is very often, sadly, an afterthought. And it's also a crucial part of localization. But it also requires budgeting, time, and effort from all parts, and even more effort than the localization part for developers, because there are the ones that have to check the bugs and possibly fix them if the translators can't fix them on the localization kit themselves.
Yeah.
But I wanted to mention how important localization QA is, just as important as it is, regular QA on any software or video game. Localization QA, it's also very important. You can have like a myriad of things go wrong, and even one stupid mistake can ruin the experience for your players on a certain language. And I think the kind of localization QA issue that you don't pick up, it's the kind of issue that will put off the most your players, because they feel like that you are insulting their culture, their language, right? Even more, maybe even more so than a bad translation. For example, as you said, if something from the menus or the interface is locked to the QWERTY keyboard, but you are using a different keyboard, you will feel like like insulted. Why am I being given a game in French if I can play it properly? Or same with, for example, menus. If the text expands too much and it overflows and or fall off the screen and you can't read what it says, you are kind of like insulting. There's one particular case which is very extreme but illustrates this point beautifully. It's a Korean game that was translated, but one puzzle wasn't translated. I mean, you couldn't find the solution. You couldn't pass this puzzle because the solution was in Korean. Like, you had to think in Korean, and the only way was to look for the solution in a gameplay video. Obviously, this is very extreme, but if you don't give it too much thought, it can happen. And obviously this was a localization QA issue, because if somebody had played the game in English or in other language for that matter, they will have found out that there was a puzzle blocking you out from the game because you didn't know Korean.
Yeah, that's one for sure. And also it's like you said, the text that overflows, it's if you want to click somewhere, and because of the text that overflows, you cannot because it's not working properly, or it's stupid. But don't assume that importing the translation will work from day one. Something wrong can happen. Like at some point, maybe you will find some text in German instead of French or whatever, and that too is annoying because suddenly it takes the player out of the game. Like suddenly they don't understand, they are missing something, and it's frustrating when you say it could have been seen in QA.
Yeah.
It's always something like this. Like, don't underestimate the power of QA. It's very important because it's like checking the user experience is as perfect as possible or as perfect as you want it. So obviously, if something is wrong, then the game will suffer a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered mostly the dev part. Would you like to switch from the other side of the agency and go with translators, a few things to communicate and work with providers, I would say, even if as a team, if you have tips to share?
Yeah. I think this will deserve its its own session again. But I think that it's very important to learn. This is one of these words you always see written, but when you have to say it verbally, it gets strange. But etiquette.
Yeah, etiquette.
Yeah,
it's French.
I'm assuming it's French. It's very important to learn corporate etiquette. How to communicate. In English, obviously also in your own language, but you probably learned, business communication in your own language from, reading or something. But English, it's not something it's not something that simple to learn about this. So I would suggest, trying to find some articles about etiquette, corporate etiquette, how to properly, even I've seen people start an email without a greeting, and it's kind of rude.
Yeah.
So learning all of these little bits is going to at least put you out from a kind of how do you say it? A certain group of people that are rude when they communicate or something, and you will come as at least an approachable person. And obviously you want your message to be read and to resonate with the other part that is reading. So most of the time when you are a translator and you are for example sending your CV or your portfolio to an agency, you're going to talk with a vendor manager. Vendor managers take care of vendors, right, of translators, and they are an entire different species than project managers. So when you talk with vendor managers, it's very important to try to communicate right away what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge you are providing to them. So this is very, very simple, and it may sound a little bit like even very straightforward. But when you send an email on your subject line, put your source and your target languages, if you are a freelancer or not, right? And when you are greeting that person, if you have their name, go ahead and say hi, first name, and if you want to put their surname, it depends also on the etiquette on your country. But if you don't know who you are talking with, hi X team, or what you in the worst case scenario, to whom it may concern, but it seems you are talking to I don't know, some entity.
Someone unknown, like a bottle thrown in the sea. Usually I may be a bit rude, but when I really don't know, like if it's a generic info email, I will just say hello. That's it.
That works.
Super cold, but at least I'm trying something.
Yeah. You can even try to go ahead and be a little bit funny if you think the other, if the other company has like a young profile, or some kind of this vibrant vibe. You can try to go and be a little bit funny, even to call their attention. Maybe I remember I once applied to a certain agency like 4 times. And I never got an email back from them. And I remember that I said, okay, this is the last one, and I'm going to get my ego back. And my heading was, hey, it's me again. And it worked. But
yeah.
But I was like, it was a desperate measure.
You really wanted to work with them.
Yeah, I didn't end up working with them at the end. I just wanted to, I needed to. So yeah, basically communication at this very basic level is very important. And I think a lot of people fail in trying to communicate the personality and all the knowledge they have in their heads in a single email, because that's all you have. You have a single email, right?
Nice sentence, Juan.
Yeah.
Cute headline. Maybe you can try this one next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you risk ending up like being like a little cocky, but to each their own. No, but what I want to say is that you only have one shot at telling your story, who you are, what you are bringing. And even if you are a complete beginner and you don't have experience, you don't have anything on your portfolio, you're doing your first steps even bringing that up might help. Because what I always said to new translators is that translation agencies aren't a monolithic being, that has existed for thousands of years. There are new agencies all the time, and maybe you send the right email at the right time. They were looking for somebody without experience to, they're expecting not to pay a premium service, but maybe a fair price. And they have a very experienced reviewer who is going to train you. And maybe down the line, they know that 6 months from now, they have a very good translator that was, instructed by their own trusted reviewer. And you happen to be their trusted translator. And 6 months ago, you didn't have any experience at all. I think this is very important. And for that to happen, you have to knock a lot of doors. You can't sleep, knowing that you sent 2 emails and okay, I'm going to get it. No, this is hundreds of emails, and in between you had to go doing other stuff, right? Nobody started translating video games 100% of the time. We all did our other stuff. I don't know, technology, tourism, general brochures, whatever.
Yeah.
So while the perfect position is being prepared, try and go, and you will probably learn a lot that then you can bring to video game localization.
Yeah, because sometimes you will learn on a specific topic related to a game. Like, I don't know, did you translate anything related to weapons for a museum? Could be very useful for RPG game in medieval ages or something. If you have some knowledge of a sport, you can try to bring that to your profile to say that you have good knowledge of a certain sport in both languages. And the trick is to know that, unfortunately for us, and maybe fortunately for agencies, they receive hundreds of emails every day. So obviously it's very tough to stand out. So like you said, you have one shot to really stand out. And if you put basic information like greeting the person, putting clear information about your languages, because one thing they don't need is like hunting you down to know what languages you are translating from and into. What are your specialization? Yeah, fail. Anyway, what do you work, like the fields you've chosen to work into, for example, it's very important as well.
Yeah, even like stuff that you think it's irrelevant, but for them it's important. It's also, for example, where you reside, or basically where your tax residence is. What's your time zone, right? So you are basically saving time from the other people, and saving you also a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
So as much and concise information as you can condense in a single message, it's going to probably make you look a lot better than other candidates that may be failing at that. And again, in your own CV, don't hesitate, if you don't have as much experience yet, to put stuff that may seem random at first. But for example, if you love, I know, watching anime or reading manga, go ahead and put at some box that says interests, and put manga and anime or history or sports or whatever. I worked on a project the past year, which was related to life sciences. It was kind of a course but gamified. So it was not entirely a game, but it was a gamified version of a life sciences course. And so it happens that in high school, the specialization from my school was life sciences. And it happens I know a lot about biology, about physics, about chemistry, And I never studied after school. But when the project manager asked me, I told him, man, I am the right person. The whole project was like a trip down memory lane, because it was all stuff I already have on my mind. It was just I had to search for it, and obviously Wikipedia helped me a little bit. And then actually, after that project, I donated to the Wikipedia. I felt the need to. But that kind of stuff, maybe you think it's unrelated, but it was a very nice project, a fairly large project. It was a lot of work for me, and with an amazing team, an amazing agency. If I hadn't mentioned that I have like some background on life sciences, maybe they will have gone to look for someone, not necessarily a game translator. That's the beautiful thing about video games. They touch so many topics.
Yeah.
That you can fit on one for sure. There's going to be one game that is going to be just right for you, and so it's. But if you never say so, if you never give the information to the part, it's going to be hard. So I think it's about providing with the information and the knowledge so the other part can light a bulb when the right time comes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be right now. When you start applying for agencies, you don't expect to get work tomorrow. You are doing a long-term investment, basically. And if 1 or 2 years from now you are buried under work, you are rejecting work because you can't take anything else, it's because you did things right 1 or 2 years ago, not because you're doing things but you're also doing things right now. But I mean, you have to think in mid and long term. So try not to get anxiety to bring you down. If you are still not getting results after months of applying to agencies, try to reach out to any colleague, or if you don't know any other translators, to some friend or somebody else to review your CV, your way of communication. Maybe if you feel your English is not very strong, taking some course, or having some other friend or a native speaker to review your messages. These are all things that maybe when we have a little bit more experience, we take them for granted, but they're not so obvious when you're just starting out, right? So I think one of the best things you can do is to reach out to your colleagues, to other people on the same situation as you, and you will probably find that sharing information is going to, it's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, obviously. It's always like having a network. If you don't have one, there are associations like a translator association. I would always recommend to pick your first translator association as the one in the country where you live, because they can give you information related to doing a business in your country. And you will find a lot of translators, and you can just try to go to some events, volunteer, make yourself known, and people will remember you, and that can help. And like you said, after that you feel more confident, you can ask those people to help you out, to let them know you're available. So maybe if they have too much work and you're working in the same field, maybe they can send some work to you and maybe do the proofreading, for example. It's tough. It's very tough. I start from a background where nobody, when I was at university, did translation as a career after that. So I started with zero network. And so I started to read a lot of blog posts. And it was very frustrating because it was most of people with experience telling you what to do, and you're like, yes, but I don't have experience. So just like Guido said, the basic, and build a network of people little by little that you can trust, for example, either in a translator association or also like us at the IGDA in the field you want to work with. You can also meet people doing something similar to what you do and potential clients.
Yeah.
I've seen a question from Ricardo. Can we get a PM view about translators rejecting work due to lack of time? Maybe what is the good thing to do when you cannot work on a project?
Yeah, sure. This is probably a very subjective answer because it's not the same to be, for example, a PM for a small company in which you are responsible for a lot of stuff that goes through your hands. Maybe if you're working for a bigger company, you have a bigger pool of translators. Maybe it's not a big deal. If you get rejected by one, you have tens others. But at least personally, when I worked as a project manager, I never thought bad of a translator for rejecting work, even if it's for personal reasons, like my daughter is sick, I have to get her to the hospital, or today is my free day, or today is a national day where I live, so I'm taking the day off. At least I didn't take it in a bad manner at all. As long as you communicate it professionally, and you don't necessarily have to feel obliged to give a reason why you can't. Just can say that you are too busy at the moment, or you're taking some time off because you have finished a huge project or whatever. It's a good idea to always give alternatives. I can't make this deadline, but I could deliver by Thursday. I can't take care of translation, but maybe I can review it if we start next week. Sorry, I can take care of this, but I can recommend my best friend, whatever, and you recommend a colleague. So, you are not only doing a favor to your colleague, but also to the PM that doesn't have to look for a new translator. There's plenty of things you can say besides no. And that's very important. This is something you learn on sales pitch. I learned this while on a call center selling internet services. So basically, to never say no. You can say no and then add something else, like no, but my colleague can do it. No, but I can review. And maybe if you simply don't feel like no, I'm taking some time off. I hope you understand. Obviously, PMs are humans, and contrary to popular belief, PMs are not powerful persons in a company. They are basically following guidelines from their company, and they can't take decisions. They have margins, and they can, navigate between those margins. But PMs are not the people that make decisions at a company level. So just so you know that if you can't do one job, it's a little bit unlikely that the whole agency is not going to send you back work because one PM it got you a little bit on his side. But yeah, I mean, again, communicating it's key to making the other person know what's going on.
Yeah, that's important. And like you said, always provide a solution if you can't, a longer deadline, maybe someone else. Sometimes I find it tricky with agencies if it's a translator they don't already have in the database, because it means they have kind of to trust you that this person would do a good work even if they didn't make them pass their own test, for example.
Yeah.
So sometimes they take the risk. Sometimes they will try to look into the database if someone else with your language pair and your experience level or field, for example, if they find someone with a similar profile as yours, is available as well.
Yeah, but even then, the ball is on their court, so it's no longer hot in your hands. At least you try to do something, and certainly the PM is going to appreciate you trying to come up with a solution. In worst case scenario, if the PM can't find someone else from their own database, they can reach out to this new person.
Yeah.
And start collaborating.
I think that it's key to provide this kind of solution, even when you are asking questions from the developers. Like you spot an issue. Something I always try to do is, like, when I see something wrong, I try to, if I'm not stopped by this, I try to come up with one or different solutions that could work, and ask for feedback on this. I think that is very important to like communicate properly with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, this is extensible to any situation. If you spot an issue, if you identify an issue, and you can imagine a solution in your head, you can go ahead and just say it. Just try to put in words what the solution may be, and maybe you are giving a new idea to the other person that maybe they weren't aware of it. So yeah, I think we have a very silly saying in Spanish, but we say that people understand each other talking. If you don't talk, if you don't establish that communication, that dialogue, if you just say no or this is wrong, there's no dialogue in that, or you are putting the burden of dialogue on the other person. And I think obviously we all have our bad days, or maybe when you're communicating in another language that it's not your native language, maybe some nuances or some stuff can escape your mind, but I think it's important to try and not be as harsh as one can sound when you are read out of context. So yeah,
exactly. It's like asking questions and try to be as clear as possible, and always take into account that maybe the person you're talking to doesn't speak your language, and there can be lots of misunderstanding from that.
Yeah.
So it's a bit frustrating. So always be careful, and that goes like talking with your project manager. Try to be clear when something is unclear, or stuff like this, and when you ask questions, because that's the other important fact in game localization when you're working on such project, is asking questions in the query file.
Any other questions?
I have a question from Julia. If you want, I'm looking at it. Sorry, I have screens everywhere. She asked, tricky questions about rates. Let's go. You ready? What's the best way to negotiate the highest rates as a freelancer versus a salary for a PM role? Okay, so now we're talking maybe freelancing as a PM or being employed as a PM. That's a kind of tricky part. Have you done PM freelancing?
I did freelancing. I mean, it was like remote freelancing, but I worked 9 hours a day. I had a fixed hours and everything. It
Okay.
was kind of freelancing.
Okay.
I mean, I was a freelancer in papers. I had to pay my taxes and everything. I mean, I think it varies a lot. I think it's very related to your experience. Obviously, if you don't have much experience, well, you have to work your way. But I think you have you can find very good salaries. Obviously, it helps a lot to have a certification from the Project Management Institute, the PMI. Okay. They provide courses all around the world, I think. I don't know if they do remote stuff. Maybe after the pandemics and everything, they're doing it. So if you want to step up your game as a project manager, I think it's a very good idea to do the PMI courses. They have several. I don't remember now the name.
Okay.
But you can look for it, Project Management Institute, and they have a lot of options. And if you have the PMI certification in your resume, it's going to look great. And definitely your chances of getting a lot of higher rates or better positions, it's going to be much better. And I also know from some colleagues that are freelancing as project managers in the video game localization industry. So they are how to say it, they're not fixed positions, but they PM for a couple of hours a week, maybe.
Okay.
Because a certain agency has, more work that they can take internally, but not enough to, justify another fixed position at the company. So this is also something that it's real, and something I also recommend to fellow translators is to go and try and see if they can get a PM position. Maybe at a local agency from the city or nearby. Because working as a PM is a great experience for a translator. You understand a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes and that maybe you don't really get to see when you're working as a freelancer, okay, as a translator. So yeah, I would definitely suggest going for PMing. But regarding this question, I think it's very, very specific. I can only say that you can definitely get good positions and good salaries or rates if you're freelancing. But they come with experience and, as I said, certifications if you can.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it depends. Maybe the country where you are, the language, maybe... Well, the language doesn't really come into play with project management. It's good if you have some knowledge of specific language to be prepared, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just for example, my last PM position was for a Russian company, and I was living in Argentina. So, I was living in Argentina and working for a Russian company. So, the possibilities are endless. you can be working for Chinese companies, for American or European. It's something to have in mind is that maybe a company from the other part of the world is looking for someone in your own time zone. Yeah. So, even if you don't have that much experience, you hit the sweet spot, right? So even that small of a detail can be a huge difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking exactly about time zones, actually, that maybe it could be an advantage because you can be working around the clock, and it helps with the files and everything. And if you're in touch with everyone else in your team, they can forward you questions or something that you can forward to the translators and keep up with everything.
Yeah, that happens a lot in Latin America, which is a little bit closer to the United States times than Europe or Asia.
Yeah.
So most European and Asian companies tend to look for people in Latin America, be it Mexico, Chile, Argentina, to take care of their American clients, because most of the team is asleep by the time they are just waking up. So yeah.
Okay. Well, did we cover everything? If you still have questions in the chat, please go ahead. Ask anything you want. Anything else? I was thinking about something, but I forgot it. About communicating for freelancers. I think we covered everything. We talk a bit about like communicating as a freelancer with the end client via the query file. Maybe we can go, if there is no question at the moment, we can go with some like wrapping up with advice, a recap for devs, for example. What's the best practices in communicating and working with people, except allocating for time?
Well, as we said, I think the takeaway key here is that the sooner you start thinking about these processes, the better. And obviously, since not everybody knows everything about localization, asking questions and reaching out to people is key, crucial. And as we said, even if you don't feel like talking to agencies yet, you can reach out to other developers that may have already experience with localization, or publishers, or even individuals as us, freelance translators, and you will probably, understand a little bit more of the whole picture. So I think looking for information, asking questions, and reaching out, it's the best thing you can do early on.
Yeah, always early. Even if you don't do it in the end, at least ask to be prepared. I think it's
and
anticipating.
And even if it's your first project, your first game, or one of your first games, it's going to be very valuable information down the road. I think most devs want to keep on developing games. So even if you don't end up translating your first game, you can get a lot of information to do things right on your second game. Or maybe you are hired into a small team and you can bring all that knowledge and all that value to another team. And I think it's a very good situation to be in. But obviously you have to put some time on it.
Obviously, yes. So as resources, you still have, like we said, the best practice guide from the IGDA, which is a good starting point. And and don't forget about the certification in all languages. If you go on consoles, that could save you quite a few stressful times, like your deadline coming up and your certification not ready. We all want to avoid that. And little bit of advice for freelancers.
Well, again, trying to be as clear and concise, and as trying to convey as much information as they can on their communication. Again, trying to be polite, approachable, reachable. And again, if you feel you're missing something, then look for it. If you don't find information in the internet, reach out to your colleagues, to other people that may be in the same situation as you, and try to work that out. I mean, being a freelancer and being a translator is improving constantly. But in order to improve, you have to identify what are your downfalls, where you are failing. So, realizing what you are lacking is the first step. Once you realize it and you identify it, you have to put, all your brain gears in action. And again, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help.
Yeah, that works for everyone. Ask questions. Okay, I don't know how much latency we have, but I don't see any other questions, not even on Discord. So I think that's it.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Guido, for joining us today. That was a very nice chat and lots of information. For everyone who missed the beginning, the replay will be available in a few minutes after the end of the live. You can subscribe to the channel to get the next updates. Usually we try to do one per month, so that's the point. You can follow us on Twitter. We have also a Discord server where maybe if Guido is still available, you can leave him messages in the AMA channel that he can read and answer you back later. To join the Discord server, you will find my profile, LinkedIn profile, or Julia's LinkedIn profile below in the description box. I've put your contact detail too, Guido, your Twitter and LinkedIn if people want to reach out to you. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm saying a big hi also from Julia, who couldn't be there with us today, but she was here to support us if possible. I read that she had some issues to join in the chat. And sorry for the hiccup at the beginning with the sound. It's me. always trying to do things
it's
right. There's always an issue, you see, in localization. So,
but it's not you. If there's something that the technology industry as a whole needs to improve, it's freaking audio and camera stuff.
Yeah, we had a lot of technical issues, but it worked. We made it until the end. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks again, Guido. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.